Jujutsu Kaisen's anime adaptation is pure cinema, at a level above almost everything else in the shonen space, so it's only natural that its opening credit sequences would be just as cinematic. They've always been these wild, beautiful, avant-garde affairs with phenomenal music, but the latest one, AIZO, is something extra special. That title is an untranslatable kanji compound that simultaneously means love and hate, and every frame of animation that goes with it is just as layered with meaning. With 125 shots of symbolism and foreshadowing to analyze, that's as many as both Season 2 OPs combined. It is easily the densest opening I have ever tackled. So I'd like to just dive right into it as quickly as possible. Before we do though, if you like video games half as much as I already know you like JJK and anime, you will definitely want to hear about today's sponsor. Starforge Systems builds competitively priced, powerful computers that run cool and look cool doing it, be they tempered glass gaming beasts or button-down business machines. But let's be real, you and me, we don't need a PC to fit any old IKEA-ass living room, unless of course we're talking about the now discontinued Detolf and its unrivaled quality as an anime figure display case, because that is the exact strike zone their gorgeous limited edition anime rigs hit. Just imagine their JJK Zero PC in your setup, aglow with the cold blue of cursed energy as the menacing form of Rika protects your GPU from roving bands of data center engineers, or your desk could be crackling with the electric neon energy of Kaiju number 8. Still not colorful enough for you? Feast your eyes on their Hell's Paradise and Freerun PCs, or my personal favorite, the Chainsaw Man collab, which I should be able to give you a closer look at real soon. And if none of those are your favorite anime, they also have some beautiful brand neutral cases with chill city pop vibes and even stained glass siding. Any one of these can be customized with your choice of acrylic plate light, and the options don't just stop with your rig. Starforge carries matching desk mats and wall art to help tie your whole setup together, which also work quite well as TCG playmats or standalone decor. If any of that caught your eye, just click the link in the doobly-doo to check it out today. With everything it has going on, you'd think this OP would start with a bang, but instead, it takes its time drawing us in, with Yuji taking a slow walk through a world turned upside down in the aftermath of Shibuya. The stark red and black color palette of the eclipse-lit scene evokes the look of his fight with Higuruma, speaking to the intense guilt over Sukuna's actions, the blood on his hands that haunts him through this entire season. And I do think that connection is intentional, because the only other hues in this shot, subtle as they are some hints of blue, the defense attorney color, at the very periphery. As Yuji's head passes over the blacked out sun, he reveals Kenjaku's eye staring down at us with cold intensity, a motif that serves to bookend the OP. After that, we see Sukuna's black nail-polished hand cranking up a stove burner in his malevolent kitchen like some kind of guitar amp, and then the OP starts with a bang. An explosion ripping through Shibuya, superimposed over stove burners that ring the radius of the King of Curses domain expansion, as we're treated to this gorgeously distorted title card for literally 1 second before it's replaced by a string of key quotes and phrases from throughout the series. Far too many to read them all out here, so I'll just leave a list of the translations on screen for a moment, and you can pause if you want to read them all, just as the opening's director intended. The carnage in Shibuya sends Yuta rocketing forward on a collision course with Yuji in 2 gorgeous Sakuga cuts that pretty plainly reference their fight from the start of the season. The shot of Yuta flying between the buildings evokes the narrow path that he has to walk between following the higher-ups' orders and not actually killing Yuji for real, while Yuji falling out of the inverted skyline creates a symbolic connection between him and the OP's dropping bomb motif, while also suggesting that his arc through the season will be one of descending into hell, so to speak. The punch he throws at the camera creates a smash cut to his brother Choso, who dives into the center of a seemingly infinite loop of tatami rooms with very fancy gold leaf shoji to sort of spin there in the fetal position. The pose is an obvious allusion to his nature as a cursed womb, while the motion is a very literal representation of the lyrics here: spin on, the age keeps turning. The infinite traditional background, meanwhile, may be a depiction of Tengen's barrier, where Choso spends most of this season, or it could simply be an allusion to how he's old as f***. Either way, this shot in particular sparked a lot of hilarious memes on the Japanese side of the JJK fandom. But speaking of memes, Potential Man himself jumps in next, hopping off a roof into an intersection somewhere in Tokyo, I don't know, I'm not a geo-guesser, expanding his Chimera Shadow Garden domain as he falls, which transforms the space behind him into the Zenin estate. His mastery over the 10 Shadows technique marking him as the rightful heir to the clan. Meanwhile, Maki, the Zenin Black Sheep, dances through Jogo's flames in Shibuya Station, so intense they burn away the very outline around her as this moment reforges her into the hardened warrior in the image of Toji, who will one day bring about the clan's end. We return to Toji's son as he rises up through symbols representing 7 of the 10 Shadows Shikigami, the Divine Dogs, Max Elephant, Nue, Gama the Toad, Orochi, Rabbit Escape, and Mahoraga in that order, each one set against a different background that I presume relates in some way to the individual summon, or to maybe one of the 10 Imperial treasures that they each represent. The Gyokuken dogs, for instance, are represented by 2 Koma Inu statues marked with kanji that combine to say offering. Typically, you'd see such an arrangement of lion dog statues guarding either side of a torii gate at a shrine, but here they appear before a concrete wall of some sort, maybe outside or possibly in a museum. I'm not really sure. Again, I'm not a geoguesser or a Japanese mythology scholar for that matter, so identifying all 7 of the dimly lit locations that appear in this 1-second montage is a little beyond me, except for the final image of the distinctive Indian-style pillars at Tsukiji Hongwanji Temple, a building whose doors are adorned with a very familiar symbol, which does reinforce the idea that the other locations are probably also significant to the specific Shikigami shown in front of them. If you are a GeoGuessr, please help me out in the comments. What I can tell you about these shots is that the 3 shadows we don't see were all left out for a reason. Tiger Funeral doesn't appear at any point in either of the JJK manga, and while Round Deer and Piercing Ox both do, neither of them are actually used by Megumi. The next chant of AIZO AIZO brings with it an adorable animation of Baby Panda flopping forward in Yaga's hidden garden where he keeps all the cursed corpse kids, cruelly contrasted with 2 shots of his dad under the streetlight where Gakuganji is about to kill him, turning away from us and his ursine son as he stares down the road to whatever comes next. But what comes next in the OP are 2 matching images of Maki and Yuta, each referencing an iconic woodblock print by the legendary ukiyo-e master Utagawa Kuniyoshi. Maki is depicted as Kashiwade no Hanoshi, one of the 108 heroes of the water margin, using the split soul katana that Mai left her to gouge out the eye of a tiger. In the original story and the painting it's based on, this tiger devoured Kashiwade no Hanoshi's daughter, so here it probably symbolizes the Zenin clan, which effectively did the same to Mai. Yuta, meanwhile, recreates the suicide of Morozumi Masakiyo from the 24 Generals of the Takeda clan series, which depicts the Lord of Bungo plunging his sword into a landmine to take his enemy out with him. The actual pose here very clearly depicts the shot of Yuta taking out that anglerfish curse that attacks that one little girl at the very end of last last season. You can even see its teeth sticking up at the bottom of the image, but the deeper meaning of the painting could be a reference to his attempted self-sacrifice to take out Geto in JJK 0. The next shot shows Maki dancing again at some point before the Shibuya incident, her motion mirroring the prior shot of her in the flames, but this time on a rooftop with a blood-red moon behind her. Possibly a depiction of her first fight alongside Yuta on the school roof in JJK 0, though she did have a higher ponytail at that point in time. Either way, the motion blends seamlessly into the next shots of Yuji flying toward Yuta, which play somewhat ironically over the lyric "We drift apart, pulled away from each other," and that's followed by a cool little montage of Team Tengen channeling their cursed energy into their signature moves. Not the deepest 3 seconds of content, basically just aura farming, but it's followed by a 1-second flash of trauma POVs that fuel that cursed energy. First, we see Choso's view of the dinner that never happened with Yuji and all their other brothers, then Megumi standing over the awakened Sumiki in her hospital bed. After that comes Panda in his crib staring up at Yaga and just look at him little paw, then Maki staring at her poor broken mom as she sobs in a dark corner of the Zenin estate, and finally Yuji trying to wash the blood from his hands in a dirty bathroom sink as Sukuna grins evilly back at him through the mirror. Notably not the bathroom that he fought Choso in right before Sukuna took control, but probably a reference to it. After that, to lift our spirits, we're given a tall girl's big ass eye view of Yuki staring down from some rooftop, again, GeoGuessers help me out in the comments, at one of the Culling game colony barriers, which likely has her attention because it represents 2 potential solutions to her lifelong goal of ridding the world of cursed spirits. Firstly, with its ability to give any ordinary person curse manipulation powers, and secondly, with its potential to kill everyone in Japan. This then cuts to a top-down image of one of the barriers breaking apart in a composition evoking an inverted Japanese flag, which I believe foreshadows the aftermath of Yuta's big fight for the season. That in turn gives way to the actual title card, finally, set against a wireframe image of some skyscrapers breaking apart, which is possibly another depiction of Sukuna dismantling Shibuya, since all of the buildings seem to be sliced along clean lines, and also that's what the last title card represented. This then fades to an image of the metaphorical bomb that Kenny plans to drop on the Culling game once only the strongest players are left. From there, we cut to a parody of the Section 9 lineup shot from the opening of Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex second gig, a season which happens to involve dealing with both the aftermath and present-day threat of bombs being dropped on Japan, so the connection there I think is pretty obvious. Despite actually sharing a voice with the Puppet Master from Mamoru Oshii's original Gits film, in this parody Tengen takes the place of Major Motoko, who is left alone after sighing in the original OP, just as Tengen would be left alone if the entire population of Japan were fused into them. But instead of a stack of random CRT TVs, Tengen's sighing face ends up projected onto the monitor wall at Hakari's Fight Club. It's not Hakari watching him though, but rather good old Kenny again, who does actually have the ability to remote view events in the Culling game, but only uses a single CRT, ironically much closer to the one that we actually see in that Ghost in the Shell OP, and sometimes a smartphone. I think placing him here signifies both his role in setting up and, to an extent, fixing the fights of the Culling game, as well as to the mad jujutsu scientist's ultimate motivation for doing all of this, that he's bored and just kinda wants to see what'll happen if he does. The next few shots more clearly evoke that, as we see him place a colony barrier within a miniature model of Tokyo and stare down the barrel like a researcher peering into a petri dish. This sequence ends with yet another shot of his eye, identical to the one in the eclipse at the start, staring at us once again with that chilling, manic curiosity. The next line of the song roughly translates to, "This love is a worthless failure, but forgive me," and who should appear on the word worthless failure but the failure of the Zenin clan herself, Maki, once again, strutting confidently down a fashion runway to kill her whole family. The dark reflection beneath her feet is the spirit of her recently lost twin, walking with her into battle, while her decidedly masculine appearance on this stage for performative femininity shows her defiance of the Zenin clan's misogynistic standards. Speaking of stages, the next line of the song says, "I'll fight to the end on this stage," while showing us the widest shot yet of a Culling game colony, this one in Sendai, which is both Yuji's hometown and where Yuta ends up in this arc. In Shinto, doves are messengers of Hachiman, the god of archery and war, so despite the tranquil vibe of the shot, it actually hints that Sendai is one of the Culling game's most brutal battlefields. Yuji, meanwhile, is shown with this blank, haunted look on his face as shimmering blue light washes over him like the sun through water. Some have theorized that this is him watching all the carnage of the Culling games, the kanji for which also describes annihilation migration, a phenomenon where fish are swept into unfavorably cold waters and must adapt or die. But personally, I think this is meant to contrast the red imagery from the start of the OP, representing his fight with Higuruma, which takes place on a stage with a bathtub full of water. Again, I'm gonna be honest with you, I have no idea what this black and white shot of toy blocks stacking themselves up is meant to represent, or the one immediately after it of a bunch of baby pandas running through a forest. Considering the context of everything else in this sequence, though, I suspect that both of those shots are references to either famous paintings or photos or maybe movies or cuts from anime, but I don't know all of the art in existence, and nobody else online has identified them, so it's kind of hard to narrow down. Now, the rewinding VHS shot of Maki and Mai skipping through the field, I can identify because it's a reference to this color spread from the manga, which in turn was inspired by a photo of the manzai comedy duo Downtown, which Gege is a big fan of. The rest of the shots in this sequence all pay homage to famous paintings as they depict various characters' families, starting with Yuji and his mother Kaori as Egon Sheila's dead mother. Kaori is, like Geto, a corpse piloted by Kenjaku's brain, so the connection there is pretty obvious. But another interesting connection is the red pigment, possibly blood, on Yuji's hands, which also appears in the original painting. The next one shows Maki and Mai as Peter Paul Rubens' two sleeping children, a soft, innocent portrayal of youth that hides a cruel irony as it depicts the sleeping children of Rubens' own dead brother. The next image of Yaga and Panda bears less direct compositional similarity to its inspiration, Camille Monet and Child in the Artist's Garden, painted by Claude Monet, but the brushwork and coloration of the flowers behind them makes the influence unmistakable. When the original was painted, by the way, Camille was already very sick, and she died just 2 years later, echoing Yaga's fate. The sketch of Kusakabe's sister and her dead son Takeru hugging is a riff on Mother with Child in Her Arms by Kathy Kollwitz, a First World Wartime crayon lithograph of a mother whose unrestrained joy contrasts the artist's own longing for her son lost on the battlefield just a couple years prior. Maki and Mai's mother looks a whole lot less happy in the next shot as she does her best animated impression of Edvard Munch's The Scream, which I feel is pretty self-explanatory as art goes. That's all a little serious, so the OP chooses to interrupt itself here with our first Takaba calisthenics bumper, which is mainly here to tell us that everyone's favorite hack comedian is a goofy guy. Next, Naoya, a much less goofy guy, comes running in to attack his cousin at super speed, the animation running at 12 frames a second for the sake of clarity because the shot is less than a second long. However, the constant rotation of the background means the full image still moves at 24 frames per second, keeping it consistent with his powers in a very clever way. For a split second, then, we see Maki and Mai in shadow and light respectively, divided down the middle of the frame by the Zenin household. That's followed by two matching paintings of Remy leading Megumi to the trap in Shinjuku, and Rin leading Yuji to meet Higuruma, the parallel imagery showing the diverging paths our two heroes are about to take through the Culling games from this crossroads. The crossroads themselves, by the way, are a reference to the Y Junctions photo collections by Tadanori Yoko, an obsessive artist who's photographed hundreds of these interesting intersections throughout Japan, and even painted many of them in a variety of styles. The style used here gives both junctions a creepy, liminal, foreboding feeling, suggesting that at least one of these guides is not to be trusted, which, indeed, she isn't. The sequence even gives us a hint as to who's telling the truth, with the second shot of Rin cutting to a painting of Higuruma's first victims lying dead in the courthouse. This may also be a reference to a real painting, but if it is, I can't find anything resembling the composition. After that comes another Takaba bumper, this one demonstrating that Yuji is also a goofy guy, with the kanji on Takaba's Hachimaki headband reading "Sure Victory." Then it's back to the darker imagery, with Yuji raising his hands up to do the big clap that summons all the curses to him at the end of last season. However, before he can finish it, the shot shifts to this murky ball of cursed energy on a red background that, in conjunction with the position of his hands, kind of brings to mind the condensed blood sphere of Choso's Convergence, which, as his brother, perhaps Yuji himself might be able to use one day. That's followed by one more calisthenics bumper on the theme's refrain, this one demonstrating that Megumi is very much not a goofy guy, yet somehow something has compelled him to join in with Takaba's antics anyway. Curious. Also, this time the headband reads "passed," which I guess means that Takaba passed the exam that he was studying for in the gym? We then see Yuta getting ready to smooch the special grade cockroach curse he fights in Sendai in the style of Gustav Klint's 1908 gold leaf painting, The Kiss. The original is rumored to be a self-portrait of the sexually voracious artist who fathered, quote, at least 14 illegitimate children according to WikiArt, which perhaps is a reference to the roach's ability to spawn its own little roach minions. It's also notable that Klimt was Egon Schille's mentor, giving some interesting subtext to both paintings of JJK's two protagonists. The sequence ends with another shot of the bomb plunging into what looks like a river of blood, and then in rapid succession, we see 17 different characters gearing up for battle as the camera pulls further and further out. Yaga tosses his shirt away to throw down with Gakuganji, Yuta slips on the Rika ring to fight Yuji, Ranta's eyes bleed as he fails to stop Maki with his paralyzing glare, Gakuganji strums to announce his presence to Yaga, Choso claps together a convergence against Naoya, Higuruma draws the executioner sword on Yuji, Yuji gets ready to swing on, well, it could be a lot of guys this season, Kusakabe readies his simple domain to fight absolutely nobody, I think he just wanted to be included, Reggie draws a receipt to attack Megumi, Megumi uses his Chimera Shadow Garden back on Reggie, Panda grandstands like a pro wrestler in the Fight Club, while Maki settles into a Shiranui Geta sumo wrestling pose to fight Naoya, which is also actually another little fun bit of feminist rage bait. They don't let girls in sumo. Jinchi answers her with that big wall of fists that do absolutely nothing. Hakari closes some train doors on Yuji's face. Hirata's next, spreading their hands apart to suggest the magnetic pushing effect of their power with a glinting star on their forehead. Then Yuki appears with her Garuda Shikigami, followed by Ogi Zenin, who shows up for the exactly 2 frames it takes for Maki to decapitate his ass, and finally Naoya zips toward us and his cousin at 24 frames per second, leaving the smuggest afterimage of all time. The 3 shots following that show various powers in action, starting with another depiction of his frame manipulation technique, which is one of my favorite powers in the whole manga, by the way, because it's so clearly designed for the anime adaptation. Ryu's hair beam's another technique that really shines in animation, if you'll pardon the pun, drawn, and Chojuro Zenin's earth manipulation, I mean, that is just a static drawing of a rock, which works just as well in manga, but the billowing dust clouds add a nice animated flourish. I love the idea of using Naoya to set up this effects Sakuga showcase. Hakari poses with Tyler Durden-esque swagger in front of his own Fight Club staff. Higuruma burning the Japanese law codes in disgust with a spilled can of Boss Black coffee in the corner, essential fuel for any Japanese professional. Then comes the overcast beach, where Mai sacrifices herself to fuel Maki's power-up. Zooming into the sky, we find Kirara sparkling with all their gender nonconformity in front of the Fight Club facility, surrounded by the constellations of stars that they use to defend its rooftop entrance. And after that comes quite possibly my favorite single shot of the whole OP, a reference to Higuruma's manga cover, only instead of a rotting sunflower, the symbol of Japanese defense attorneys, this one's on fire, blue flames, in keeping with his color coding. And behind him, we see what appears to be the New York Superior Courthouse, whose facade was built to emulate the Roman Temple of Venus, being blown to bits as his faith in the Japanese justice system, which was modeled after the American justice system, which in turn was designed after Roman legal ideals, crumbles. Absolute cinema. Following that, we get a brief few frames flash of the Zenin family photo that I think sums up everything wrong with the clan in a single image. Every member has some unique detail to how they're drawn, yet all are ultimately faceless tools for the family heads sitting before them. Out of those, Nobito smiles with an arm around Naoya, his spoiled favorite son and the only one who gets to invert the family's dress code colors, while everyone else looks absolutely miserable, except Chojuro, who is never not grinning like a psycho asshole. Next come two shots of Yuki raising her hand up, maybe for another virtual mass punch. If this is a reference, I'm not sure I get it, but the hand position does seem pretty deliberate. And that's followed by a quite painterly montage of all the combatants in Sendai, which adds a new image to each one's face basically every frame, so we're just gonna go through all of them rapid fire in order of appearance. First, we see the cockroach curse, then some random square, a horde of his little cockroach minions flying up from a forest, followed by him in front of a fern or something, and a ticking clock representing how he's left dormant until certain conditions are met. Then another horde of cockroaches devouring something with blood inside it, hinting perhaps at how his cockroach swarm ability comes from eating things, and finally, a cockroach trap. Next is Ryu Ishigori firing his laser with a painting of the metaphorical bomb dropping, an old-style Japanese roof with some sort of flame-shaped aura in front of it indicating that he's one of the incarnated sorcerers, a plate of macarons symbolizing how he thinks of fighting someone strong like Yuta as his dessert, some random flames, a volcano possibly representing what his hair do, some more squares, I don't know what they mean, modern art's hard, and him having a smoke. Takako Uro's next, appearing with a star or light flare of some kind, hinting at her light-based powers, a drop of water, which refracts light, a disembodied hand that maybe represents how she can make bits of her body invisible, an abstract kaleidoscope painting, yet another reference to light bending, and finally, the prism from Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon. Pretty much no personality on display here, just a bunch of references to her powers. Dhruv Lakdawala appears next, and a frame later, we see an aura around his head that lets him control his barrier-forming Shikigami, which is mirrored on the crow to his left. That could be a reference to the pterodon things we see flying around his big rat Shikigami. Maybe those are the other Shikigami that are mentioned by the narrator. Meanwhile, on the right, the banners of his army, which conquered most of Japan in the Civil War of Wa, flutter against a blood-red sky. Next up, we see what looks like some flames over mountains, like a battle's going on there, some curse-sealing talismans, and finally a map of the southern islands of Japan with a red triangle over them, possibly representing the territory that he conquered, or maybe it's the barrier that sends people in Japan to the other side as part of Kenjaku's big plan. I don't know. I've already spent more time analyzing this than Bro spends alive on screen. Last but not least comes Yuta and Rika, with images depicting their promise as kids, the chair that Rika sits in to watch him and Maki, two different forms of Rika Taka, representing her as a curse and a living child, some shide, the zigzaggy streamers that are strung up around holy spaces in Japan, and finally what look like white roses, symbolizing the purity and innocence of their love. Whew, that was a lot, and we still have 20 shots left to go somehow, so let's pick up the pace. This lineup of Reggie's gang of idiots is a reference to Samantha's gang of idiots from the first Metabots OP. Clearly someone on JJK's staff knows ball. Next up, we see a bunch of Zenin mooks lining up to get killed by Maki in her big Kill Bill fight, and the color palette even shifts to Kill Bill yellow. The Zenin elites come next, hopping out from a rainbow explosion that I have on decent authority from the Japanese internet is a reference to something from Pretty Cure. I don't know what. There's a lot of Pretty Cure footage out there, so if you know Pre-Cure Ball, please let me know in the comments. Thank you very much. After that, we see Takaba referencing the signature Let's Go gag of his costume and pose inspo Center Man, in which the classic Japanese comedian would shout "Let's go," and a bunch of sexy ladies would come out to pose behind him. In Takaba's case, though, it's a bunch of burly dudes because Gege Akutami really likes yaoi, you do the math. More Zenin goons line up after that, but if there's a reference there, I have no idea what it is, and the same goes for the next shot of the flying hair jobbers Hanyu and Haba. There may also be some kind of reference in the shot of Kusakabe and his heartbroken sister in Yaga's garden. It does kinda look like a shot from a movie, but it also kinda looks like over 100 different stock photos and videos of people in wheelchairs, so who knows. That's followed by a shot of Maki being covered in a tidal wave of blood, contrasting with her equally wet, broken, and despondent sister Mai. This one's another painting reference to John Everett Millet's Ophelia, which depicts the Hamlet character of the same name, staring up in numb acceptance as she drowns in both grief and water, in the same way that Mai accepts her death to power up Maki. Thankfully, Hakari and Kirara are here to cheer us up by being couples goals, followed by Takako's light distortion powers redirecting Ryu's hair laser back at him on the ground. And the downward motion from that leads into, at long last, the final montage of the OP, depicting a literal bomb dropping on Tokyo as we cut to shots of various metaphorical bombs being dropped on the characters. First and most devastating is the bomb that Kenny will one day drop on Takaba, explaining why exactly his Wi-Fi joke isn't funny. Then the "hey, guess what, Ghetto's alive" bomb that he uses to seal Gojo in the prison realm. That's followed by Yaga's view in his dying moments as he drops the bomb of how to make sentient cursed corpses on Gakuganji, and then Yuji raising his blood-soaked hands to his face in the aftermath of the bomb that Sukuna dropped on him in Shibuya, finding the resolve to be a curse-killing cog in the machine of the Jujutsu world. Lastly, we see an overhead shot of the fire pit that Yuta brings him to after their fight where they meet up with Megumi, and Yuji hears about Nobara's fate. Then the image briefly cuts back to an overhead shot of Tokyo before it's torn apart with a massive explosion, revealing Kenjaku laughing hysterically, perhaps at all the suffering he's caused, or maybe just a really good joke. Either way, it's one last reminder that for all of his grand planning, all he really wants out of this is some novel entertainment to alleviate his immortal boredom, and he doesn't really care how many people he has to kill or how much he has to destroy to get it. Which is what makes him, in my book, one of the scariest villains in all of shonen. There are few who I love to hate more. But that's just my interpretation of AIZO. I'd love to hear yours in the comments down below, especially if you can figure out some of the references that I couldn't. I'm Geoff Thew, professional anime opening analyzer, signing out from How Is That a Real Job?